Hi everyone, today's lesson is going to be focusing on factoring polynomials to find the zeros, which are going to be our answers. So, to review really quickly, what is our basic standard form of a polynomial? It's going to be ax squared plus bx plus c. That is our standard form. So if we're looking at our example of 4x squared minus 8x minus 12, your first step is always going to be to find the greatest common factor out of all three of these, if at all possible. 4, 8, and 12 have a common factor of 4. So we're first going to factor out our 4. From here, you're going to look at what's inside of the parentheses. There are two ways that you can go about doing this. The first way is if you're very good, you can just look and see that this is going to be factored out as x plus 1 and x minus 3. And your 4 automatically is brought down. And this is going to be your final answer. However, if you're not familiar with factoring, you're going to take your a term, which in this case is x, and your c term, which in this case is negative 3. And to solve this the second way, you're going to multiply a times c, which will give you negative 3x squared. From here, you're going to list the factors of negative 3. The only factors of 3 in general is 1 and 3. To determine which gets the positive and which gets the negative, you look at your b term, and in this case is negative 2. The two factors that you choose from a times c have to add to negative 2. So in this case, if we're trying to add to negative 2, negative 3 has to be the bigger number, or the negative number, and 1 will be the positive number. Because negative 3 plus 1 is going to give us negative 2, and negative 3 times 1 will give us negative 3. When you find your factors, you go back and rewrite it as x squared plus 1x minus 3x minus 3. We're simply replacing our b term of negative 2 for the factors that we found from a times c. From here, you group and you factor each set of parentheses individually. So our first set will factor out an x because that's what they both have in common. They're two terms inside. When we do this, we're left with x plus 1. And we do the same thing for our second set of parentheses, which they have in common a negative 3. Inside, they're left with x, and they're left with a plus 1. How you know you've done this right is if you end up with the same terms inside of your parentheses. Here's x plus 1, here's x plus 1, so we factored everything right. From here, you group what's not inside of the parentheses, which is x minus 3, and you bring one of your parentheses down, x plus 1. And that is the same as this, and we had already originally factored out a 4, so we keep that out in front. And from here, to find your zeros, you set everything equal to 0. So 4 will be equal to 0, which we know can never happen, so honestly, you don't even have to worry about that. Your second parentheses, or your first parentheses is x minus 3 equals 0. When you go to solve this, you add 3 to both sides, and you're left with x equals 3. And the same thing with x plus 1 equals 0. You subtract 1 from both sides, and you're left with x equals negative 1. So your zeros of this function in this equation is x equals 3 and x equals negative 1. And this simply means that the zeros are going to fall on your x-axis. So that's where the graph will cross the x-axis. And that's it for today's lesson.